hardest things to do is to coach your athletes in the rain. When we're throwing in the rain, when we have competitions in the rain, especially in the discus, a lot of athletes get frustrated. They start to panic. They start to freak out. They don't have a plan. They don't understand what they should be doing. And this is something I experienced personally in 2016 at the Olympic trials. It was when I first started to work with Sam Mattis. He was the number one qualifier from the qualification day going into the finals, and he ended up not making it to the final round because of this, because it was a total downpour in Eugene in 2016. And that was one of those lessons that I learned the hard way. So this is something that happens from junior high all the way up to the professional level. Now, a unique scenario that I'm going to share with you is one thing I learned from that is last year, we were at a CYO competition with one of our junior high throwers, Loveland Zudi, who's one of our best younger athletes. She's 12 years old, and that started to rain. But we have a process. We have a breakdown of how to handle that. We practice in the rain. There's very key things that we need to do and be aware of so that we're able to execute at a high level. And I'm going to share one more story, is that even this past year at the Olympics, when it started to rain during the men's shot, I had my own thrower, Eric Favors. I had already planned with 7 towels. I was fully ready, and Eric was planned and ready for if it would possibly rain. And I remember when it started to rain, Ryan Krauser's dad immediately knew what to do. They had a plan in place. Some of the other throwers were a little bit more scatterbrained. And I think it was even, if I remember correctly, I think Otterdahl might have even put a sock on his shoe, or was thinking about throwing with a sock on his shoe, was drilling on the side to try and figure that out because it was getting really wet. And I think it goes back to a couple key factors that we have to have in place is we have to plan for these scenarios, and we have to know at the top level, you'll know what is a circle like and what's it going to be like if it gets wet. Now, when we're thinking about rain, okay, the first aspect that I like to do is one, we have to train in the rain. No matter what, we have to train in the rain. That has to happen. You can't not train in the rain. Yes, there's a point of where it becomes too much rain and we can't do it. Okay, so we have to understand when is too much rain. Typically, that's when they would cancel a high school meet. So we have to just make that judgment call ourselves. So that's the first step. The second step, know which shoes are going to be better in the rain. One error I think a lot of people make is they have like 7 different shoes that they would throw in the rain. Just have your normal shoes and then have a slow pair. Okay, if you have a slow pair, you can just switch if it gets too wet and you just want to switch over. Some athletes, I think it's better to just stay consistent and keep throwing in the same shoe. Okay, so just be aware of, if it gets really, really bad, what are you going to do with your shoes? Only have one option. You don't need to change into like 9 different shoes. I've seen athletes put another pair of shoes on, then they put a sneaker on, then they go back to the other original one, and it's just this huge head game. Just have one extra option. Okay, this is my slow shoes. These are my fast shoes. Okay, I remember back in the 2017 World Championships being in London, and seeing rain, and the women's shot was just coming out of the circle, literally just coming out of the circle. The Jamaican shot putter went out and PR'd still with water coming out of the circle. So we can get it done. Okay, we can compete at that level if we prepare. Okay, so after we set up with those shoes, now the next thing is make sure we have at least 5 to 7 towels. I'm not lying, 5 to 7 towels. Okay, and then what is the routine from when you get your implement? How are you covering it? Try to keep 3 towels dry. Try to keep 3 towels that you would be willing to take out. One dries it off. Another one you have that you can put down, and you put it back in your bag, and you put it into a plastic bag. So you also have to have that plastic bag. And then you have that extra one that might be getting a little wet if you put it on your neck. Now, with the discus, it's a little bit harder, because if your hand is getting wet and the discus is getting wet and you have wet towels, that becomes a struggle. This is where a plastic bag with your wet towels is going to be important while you have the dry ones. Put your hand in the dry towels while you have the discus going into the more wet towels, and that should enable you to get enough grip on the implement and to protect it underneath your shirt. That's the next step. Have 2 shirts. Okay, so now if we have 2 shirts, it's more likely to stay dry underneath when you put the implement underneath your shirts. That's the next step. The following step, you're probably not going to be able to use chalk. Okay, discus throwers and shot putters will likely not be able to use chalk in this case. Practice that. Practice the fact that the shot's going to be sliding like crazy. Now, if you're undercover and you're just getting wet when you go get your implement, you're probably going to be able to put chalk on your neck, so that will be okay. But just be aware of that. The next step, and this is one thing that I think Ryan Krauser did a great job at the 2024 Olympics when it did start to rain. He was just doing static starts. Okay, so that's the next step, is that when it rains, just do static starts. So when it rains in practice, you can just do static starts. That's going to help you feel more balanced on the left out of the back if you're a spinner, and you're going to get around that left a lot better, and you're going to get to the front, and you're going to be able to hit it better. So just recognize that you can make a technical change and get comfortable and confident with that technical change. Okay. And then as you work through that, you can just have that protocol. And what I recommend is before a competition, let's say that there's a competition on a Friday and it's a Wednesday, you look at the weather, but you also say to your athletes, okay, I'm going to have 8 towels. I'm going to have a bag just of towels and just of things that happen that we can use in case it does rain. I'm going to have a pair of slow shoes for you. Okay. I'm going to have extra bags that we're going to put the wet towels in. Okay. We're going to ask them to sweep out any rocks, because rocks do tend to get put in because they'll stick to, if you're on a cinder or landing area, they might stick to the bottom. And I also would even recommend at this point, when you're planning things out, talk about, do you prefer to throw in a circle that has water in it or that doesn't have water in it? Okay. So, this can go both ways. Some athletes prefer to just keep the water in it because they'll have a little bit more tension on the press down into the circle. Other throwers prefer to try and get that out, but then there can be some slime. Practice with water sitting in the circle. Practice with water not sitting in the circle, because you never know what the meet director is going to do. Okay, so that's another aspect. And I think if you can work through these things, it can be really, really important. And then just don't get frustrated. Everybody's throwing in the same situation. Everyone. That's the one thing that drives me nuts with rain, is it's like, keep your cool, be stable. Be stable mentally, because if you're stable mentally, you're going to be stable with your technique. The more stable you are with the technique, the less likely you are to slip, the more likely you are to throw farther. Okay? Stay stable. Recognize that you're all playing on the same field. You're all playing with a circle that's wet. So even in the discus, we've got to just recognize everybody's dealt the same cards. Okay? Now, one thing I will say is that wasn't exactly accurate. In 2021, Jaime sort of got screwed on that with the discus of the rain at the Tokyo Olympics. She did not get as many dry throws as some of the other competitors, but she still got an Olympic bronze medalist. So keep these things in mind with throwing in the rain. It comes back to setting up that list, practicing static starts in the rain, practicing static starts without the rain. Also, I like to have athletes just be cued on, look, really try and get as much weight on that left leg, because more load on the left leg, the less likely they are to slip. Athletes that tend to fall into the circle will slip more because they don't have as much foot pressure. So that's something to be aware of. The better your technique is, the less likely you are to fall. But then go back to preparing with the shoes, having the towels, recognizing that the chalk might not work, having towels to wipe off the implement, having towels for your hand, and really just preparing with the plastic bags as well, and knowing how you're going to make those changes, know what you're going to do in those specific wet scenarios, and how you can make progress moving forward, and automatically always try to practice in all types of weather. If you guys need help with your programming, you want a 12-week program, you want the perfect throws season, head over to throwsuniversity.com, click on the link down below in our description, head over to Throws University, pick up the perfect throws season course to help you become a better coach. Until next time, peace.